I'm Carla.
And I'm Keyes.
And we're the History Twins.
Welcome to our podcast where history is more than just dates and dead people.
Join us each episode as we explore the past through music and story.
All right. So what we got going on today?
Well, today we are talking about Hulda, the other legend of Sleepy Hollow.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yes. So as we know, we live in New York. We live in Hudson Valley. And each fall, tens of thousands of people flock to... from around the world to Sleepy Hollow, New York, to visit the burial ground made famous in Washington Irving's 1819 tale, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow.
Ooh.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah.
And in Irving's tale of the Headless Horseman, a Hessian soldier is said to return to the gravesite in search of his head that was lost during
a battle?
Yeah, during America's Revolutionary War.
Yeah. And if he can't find his own head, he looks for somebody else's.
Dun, dun, dun. And of course, we're familiar with this story quite well because of your involvement.
Sure. Jonathan Kruk has been telling the story at the Old Dutch Church of Sleepy Hollow for years and years, and I've been his accompanist and musical director.
Yes, but a few years ago, you started to give the daytime version of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow.
That's right.
Which is very fun. And, not to pick favorites, but, you're always going to be my favorite. But I really enjoyed your version of it because Jonathan's story is basically, he's taking it from the actual, text of Washington Irving, and you're telling like the daytime version, which I think you have to do because
there's entire families. You've got everybody from pre-verbal to 90.
Yeah, exactly. So your version is different, but I will say, if you are interested in learning more about the Legend of Sleepy Hollow, we are going to be talking about that in our next episode.
That's right.
But you spend it used to be just you. You would spend the whole month of October at the Old Dutch Church of Sleepy Hollow telling that story. How many shows would you do, especially when you were telling a story? How many times did you tell that story?
Well, the last year that I was the daytime storyteller and Jonathan's musician, I was 2019, and I did 85 performances in the month of October.
Oh my gosh.
And we were only performing on weekends.
Right.
So it was 3 shows, three daytime storytelling shows, and then 3 nighttime performances of Jonathan's. So it was a long weekend. Yeah. So of course, when we were dating at that time, if I wanted to spend time with you, I had to be there. That's true. Actually, I enjoyed it because I love the storytelling of both, you and Jonathan. And to get back to what today's topic is, Hulda, we found out that this famous graveyard was also known for another resident, That's right.
Hulda of Bohemia. Yeah. So she was a woman who was believed to live in Sleepy Hollow during the 1770s. 1770s. So there was a storyteller by the name of Edgar Mayhew Bacon, and he had an 1897 book called The Chronicles of Tarrytown and Sleepy Hollow. That's right. And he mentioned in his book this woman who was basket weaving and healing, and she had healing abilities. Those skills led her to being shunned as a witch. Well, and she didn't live in town. Right. She lived in a little hut outside. Out in the woods, which already would cause some suspicion. Absolutely. But it was her skills as a sharpshooter, that made her a Revolutionary War hero. That's true, but she had other skills. She could communicate with the Native Americans. Yes, which also made her very suspicious. Yeah, that added to her suspicion. And some people thought she had either married in or she'd been kidnapped and raised in a tribe. But she was, and the minister. Yes. The minister at that time of the Old Dutch Church of Sleepy Hollow, he told the congregation, the townspeople, not to speak to her because she may be a witch. And, when your minister says that, then, you're going to listen. You're going to listen. So aside from all that, though, she had other things that people did want. For example, she had herbal knowledge. Yes. That's also like code name for witch. Like, she knew how to use herbs. She must be a witch, right? Yeah. So the thing that was just so interesting, the thing I think about Hulda, like she gave and she gave and she gave, and no one she didn't really get a lot of respect, but she gave.
I've long wondered about that. Like, what was she getting from that? Why wasn't she just like, you know what, the heck with all of you?
Yeah.
I'm going to stay in my hut and you all can be sick. I don't care.
Yeah, you guys won't talk to me. You won't cross the street. Well, they didn't have streets, but you cross the road the other way when you see me coming. Mm-hmm. But what she would do when Hulda found out that someone was ill or a family member was ill, she would leave packets of herbs at their doorstep. And people figured out that it was her.
Right.
And they would actually pay her, like in these little tin. They would pay her with things that she didn't have, like
things that would come in handy.
Things that would come in handy, like little metal candle holders and things like that.
Sure.
But they would never speak to her in person. Like if they
Nor would they admit that they'd done this.
Exactly, because the minister said no, you can't.
That's
you can't be. So, now the thing about like Bohemia, where is Bohemia?
See, now that's an interesting question because we're not, you and I are not 100% sure. It's my understanding that throughout the history of Germany and Hungary, the borders moved a lot, and there were different kingdoms and whatnot, and that Bohemia was part of that somehow. But I don't fully understand how, but that's my understanding of it.
So it's like kind of around, so it might have been around Germany, kind of, sort of.
Yeah, Austria-Hungarian Empire.
And when we're doing the research, like I didn't know, I couldn't figure out how she got here. I mean, I'm sure there's all kind of ways she could have gotten here, but I don't know which one.
Oh, it's a broom.
Broom. That's right. And speaking of, because of her presence during the Revolutionary War, we also tell this story under another name, Hulda, the Witch of the Revolution.
That's right.
Some people are disappointed. Well, actually, I don't know if they're necessarily disappointed, but sometimes when I tell this story, I feel that I know people are coming to hear this story and learn about the witch and to hear about all the witchy things that she did. And I'm not really necessarily... put it this way. This isn't hocus pocus. This isn't practical magic. Like this isn't that at all. But she definitely knew things. She definitely had skills and knowledge that many cultures kind of keep. That they kind of falls under the witch kind of territory.
Right.
So I'm happy to be able to tell that story, and so the thing about Hulda. So without giving too much of the story away, we said that she had some sharpshooting skills that she used during the Revolutionary War.
Well, she also hunted for her own food.
That's right.
If you're shooting rabbits, you're going to get good at it.
Yeah. But when she volunteered her services, they're like, no,
we don't want
That's what I'm saying. She gave and she gave and she gave.
I don't really get it.
She wanted to, she's like, this is my new home, or this is my place, and I want to help protect and defend, and I want to help you people, and no respect.
No respect.
No respect.
I don't understand why she kept it up.
Some people are just, we'll
just
never
giving
know.
People,
That's just giving people. So now back to Jonathan, like when you were telling, when both of you told the story of the Legend of Sleepy Hollow. Well, in Jonathan's version, he mentions a German witch doctor that put a spell over Sleepy Hollow and said it's Sleepy Hollow because it gave a drowsy vibe.
Yeah, drowsy, dreamy influence.
Yes.
If we may quote Washington Irving.
And Jonathan also wrote about Hulda. He had a book in 2011 called The Legends and Lore of Sleepy Hollow and the Hudson Valley.
That's right.
And he even included a chapter on Hulda.
That's right.
He called her the Witch of Sleepy Hollow. And that kind of brought the story into prominence. I'm sure there was other ways because, Edgar Mayhew Bacon had also talked about her. Right. But being that Jonathan was also talking about her during this story. But, when he referred to a German witch doctor, you weren't necessarily thinking that the witch doctor was a female.
It took me years to figure that out.
Yeah.
I always thought it was male.
Yeah, and he would also do this thing like, he would do this thing that made it sound...
sort of incantation.
That
made it sound male.
It made it sound male, and it definitely didn't...
And comedic.
Yes, absolutely. It didn't sound German either. But
that too.
Yeah, so, a similarity between the Headless Horseman and Hulda is that they were both said to be buried outside of the consecrated ground of the Old Dutch Church burial ground.
That's right. Yeah.
So like next to the Old Dutch Church, so there's the Old Dutch Church, and then they have
a burying ground around that.
Right, and so they have and I think it's still an active.
Oh yeah, it's still an active cemetery.
Yeah,
sure.
but they also have graves that go back as far as the Revolutionary War.
And earlier.
Yeah, it was like 1690.
Yeah, the church was founded in 1690 something or other, 1697 I want to say.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And which is amazing, because you can go there now and see these old stones, but the story about...
And that it's still an active congregation.
Yes, and it's still an active congregation with Pastor Jeff Gargano and our friend, head docent, Deb McHugh, who have been just so helpful with us putting together, our version, our performance, our, storytelling version of Hulda. But the thing that was so interesting was that the thread about both of these characters, or both of these people who supposedly, allegedly, reportedly existed at some point, they weren't allowed to be buried in the consecrated part. So they were born, so they were buried outside.
And the main reason for that is in both cases they weren't sure that the person was Christian.
Yes.
Hulda did not attend the church.
Yes.
Nobody knew anything about this headless Hessian. So, that was the reasoning.
And what's a Hessian?
A Hessian? Oh, a Hessian is a German mercenary fighting on the side of the British. So they were hiring these German soldiers from Hessia. See, again, that moving border, that whole thing.
Yes.
Nation states that existed at one point but became part of something else. They hired these mercenaries to fight on their side, and we know for a fact that there were Hessians in New York at this time.
Yes, and they wore green?
They wore green, and we'll get to that green coat thing in another episode.
That's right, because we're taking a little detour for October, but we will be returning to our This Man's a Spy, and we'll be talking about the importance of
that green coat. Yeah.
But for now, just know that there was a Headless Horseman, and there was the Headless Horseman, and there was Hulda, who were buried outside of the consecrated ground. That's right. Now, also, isn't there another burial ground right next to it?
Well, they are right next to Sleepy Hollow Cemetery.
So Sleepy Hollow also has a cemetery.
That's right.
And who's buried there?
Oh, well, Washington Irving is buried there, and Andrew Carnegie, and
the Rockefellers.
The Rockefellers.
Yeah, there are a lot of prominent New Yorkers.
And that's still an active cemetery as well.
Yes. We'll be performing there too soon.
We will be, yeah.
Yes. So, let's see.
I hear it's a quiet audience.
Ooh. Oh, so bad. So, the thing about Hulda's story, it captured a lot of people's attention, especially after, I think Jonathan was writing about it, Jonathan Clark.
Sure.
So, people would come looking for her, especially around October.
Of course.
Deb McHugh said, she said people would come looking for the witch, and all they had, they didn't have a real gravestone for her, but they had a little flag that they used to mark her body. I don't think they did anything for the Headless Horseman, but they had a little flag that they used. But people kept stealing the flag.
That's right.
So in 2019, the Old Dutch Church of Sleepy Hollow, they honored her with a remembrance service. I mean, now think about this. That was that was during the Revolutionary War. She did some feats of bravery, and she was buried outside, but she was never given a gravestone.
Right.
In 2019, it boggles my mind, because at the time the minister then was like, she might be a witch.
She might not be Christian.
Right, exactly. Mm-hmm. Exactly. She might be a witch. She might not be Christian. Therefore, she's going to be outside. Although, we do respect her service. Here it is, 2019. Mm-hmm. Pastor Jeff Gargano and the entire, congregation agreed that Hulda of Bohemia would finally received some recognition, and they put up a gravestone in her honor in a very prominent place.
Right next to that church. Yeah.
Yes, right next to the church. And when I first heard about it in 2019, I was fascinated. I'm like, oh my God, this is so wonderful. And, I was spending all my time during any October with you at the church. So whenever people would be, mulling around, because in October, it's tourist central.
It is crazy.
It is crazy at the Old Dutch Church. So while we would be there, I spent a lot of time there. I would be visiting her gravestone. And while people would be milling around, I'm like, oh, but do you know the story about Hulda? And I would tell it to anybody who would listen because I was just so fascinated with it. So while you were telling your legend, I felt it was my job to tell the other legend, which was Hulda. So, yeah. So we'd Hulda. So let's talk a second about our story, our version of the story, absolutely. Which is kind of like what we're getting at. Mm-hmm. So in the thing about writing about history, we like to start with primary documents, whatever primary documents we could find.
Try to get as many facts as possible.
Yes, but this was more of a legend,
right?
Than so there wasn't much in the way of primary documents.
Right.
And what does it say about legend? What do you say about legend?
Inside every legend is a kernel of truth.
Is a kernel of truth.
A
kernel of truth. And so we took whatever legend, anything we could find, and then we built out a story based on other things that we could find that we did know was true.
Right.
For example, we mentioned the Revolutionary Battle, the Phoenix and the Rose.
Right. What were the Phoenix and the Rose?
The Phoenix and the Rose
were two British warships that were sent up the Hudson River.
That's right, and they came to
It was sort of a reconnaissance mission. They wanted to see what kind of defenses the Patriots had along the Hudson River. And
they made a lot of noise.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Firing their cannons. And yeah.
Sounds like men, right? Always firing their mouths off. Anyway, that's another story. So I say all that to say that was a prominent part. At least that was a story that came through. We also mentioned, we found people who lived there at the time, like a farmer. But most especially for me, we were able to incorporate actual names of enslaved Africans who lived at Phillipsburg Manor,
right?
Because those slaves were the ones who helped to build. And there was definitely at least one. There was one enslaved African in particular who had gone to Phillips and said, hey, I had a dream that you need to build this church.
Because his dam kept washing out. Phillips's dam kept washing out. Phillips had a mill on the property, Phillipsburg Manor. Mm-hmm. Should also be mentioned that the Phillips family, who from Phillipsburg Manor, owned all of Westchester County. Wow. That was their land.
Wow.
And they had a lot of tenant farmers on it. Mm-hmm. So that's, so when we talk about Phillips's property, we're talking about all of Westchester County.
Right,
and the Phillipses themselves were loyalists. They were on the side of the British. So it was a very complicated time.
Yes. And they had slaves, they had enslaved Africans working for them. And the slaves are the ones who built the Old Dutch Church, Sleepy Hollow.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so I thought it was important to incorporate the names because, we were able to look through inventory lists. Mm-hmm. And that's where I came up with the name Abbey. So I don't know for sure if the Abbey that I'm referring to would have been
how old she would have been at the time.
How old she would have been, but I at least wanted to have names.
Was she alive at the same time as Hulda? There's things that we don't know. But, the idea is we're mixing fiction with fact.
Absolutely.
And that's what makes a legend.
Yeah. And I just wanted to speak their names in the church that they helped build and may have also attended. Like, people don't think about that. Like, and especially, because these are Dutch families. Like, in that time...
well, people don't think about slavery in northern states anyway.
Start with that. Yeah. Exactly. But in a church such as the old Dutch Church of Sleepy Hollow, some of the enslaved Africans might have also attended church with their masters. Right. Maybe not in the same place. They might have had like their own, maybe they were
some
upstairs.
Of the churches, like there's a church in Cortland, which is another historic town in Westchester County, and they have a loft, and that's where the enslaved would be, and the white people would be down on the main floor. So they would both be in attendance, but they also helped build it. So I wanted to incorporate enslaved Africans in that story. And the other part about Hulda herself, she was definitely one of those marginalized people, and so were the enslaved Africans. Right. So this story of Hulda is told from the perspective of Abby, who is a young enslaved African girl, and an unexpected friendship takes place between the two of them. Right. So it's this idea that maybe it would never happen now, but here it is. You have a young enslaved African girl, and then you have this woman who lives in the woods. Right. And although they're unlikely friends, it could happen. Right. Would this be a good time? Oh, yes. Give them a little snippet of it? Yeah. So let's give a snippet of that right now. Let's do that. I was 8 years old, I think. It was an October afternoon, and I had just finished my work on Master Phillips's farm. My grandma had sent me out to gather the wool that the sheep had rubbed off on the fences and the trees. She was going to use the wool to make shawls and mittens for the coming winter. I was at the edge of the pasture, right next to the woods. Now, Grandma told me not to go into the woods because I might get lost and there were scary things there. But I had seen this fawn with little white spots. It was the end of the season and I wanted to get a closer look. But then it saw me and it ran into the woods, and I ran after it. Through the brushes and the trees, I saw those little white spots, but then I lost sight of it, and then I looked around to see if I could find it. But it was starting to get dark, and I was beginning to get cold. Now, I had heard many things about the woods here in Sleepy Hollow, about ghosts and spirits. But mostly I was told to stay away from the woods because Hulda the witch lived there. I had never heard exactly what she did, but everyone was scared of her. Therefore, so was I. I had never been this lost before. My daddy said if I had ever got lost, that I should stay where I was and that someone would come find me. But I couldn't imagine how that would happen. So I tried to go back the way I came, but then I smelled wood burning and something cooking. So I decided to follow the smell until I came to a clearing. But this wasn't home. There was a tiny bark hut with a wood pile in front of it and rabbit skins drying nearby. I had been told that the Kitchwonk people lived here, but I remembered that they lived together as a tribe, not in solitary huts like this one,
As I stood there, I tried to decide if I was going to see if I could ask someone for help or just try to turn back around. When the flap to the doorway opened, and out came a woman. She was a white woman with long black hair covered by an orange scarf. She had on a short gown and an apron over a bright red skirt. She was not native. Hulda. I couldn't move. I was petrified. She stood there with her back to me, listening, like she could feel that someone else was there. I still couldn't move. And then she turned around and she saw me. I was petrified. Then slowly, she walked towards me. And a few feet in front of me, she crouched down to look me in the eye. You're lost, aren't you? Her accent was like no other grown-up that I'd ever heard before. She didn't look like any other grown-ups I'd ever seen before either. I noticed that she had a long necklace with big beads and gold rings on her thick fingers. You don't speak? She asked. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Ah, you've heard of me, have you? You've heard of Hulda the witch. I'm not really a witch. I do not eat little children. Are you hungry? I suddenly realized that I was. Hulda reached out to a nearby basket and pulled out an apple. I almost took it, but then I remembered what the grown-ups had told me. Never eat what a witch gives you. That's how they get you. She must have read my mind because she said, you think that I put something in this apple. It's fine, really. Here, I'll show you. She put her hand under her apron and pulled out a knife. She must have seen the fear in my face because she said, I am not going to hurt you. In fact, I'm going to show you something. Have you ever heard the story about the star in the apple? I shook my head. She started working that knife in that apple, but from the middle, not from the top. She said, once there was this little apple tree, about as tall as you, and she was very sad. This little apple tree would look at the stars at night in the sky, and she'd want to touch the stars. She was surrounded by pine trees and oak trees, and they could touch the stars. One day, God asked the little apple tree, why are you so sad? And the little tree said, I'm sad because the stars are so beautiful. The pine trees and the oak trees, they can touch these stars, but I'm too close to the ground. God chuckled, and he said, little tree, the pine trees and the oak trees, they don't really touch the stars. They just look like they do. But you don't need to touch the stars, for I have put them in you. With that, Hulda held up a half of the apple, and in the very center of that apple was an unmistakable star. How did you do that? I asked. Child, it's not a trick. It's just nature. That star are just those apple seeds. That's just the way they are. Then she took a bite of her half of the apple. And she said, "There's nothing wrong with this apple. In fact, it's delicious." With that, I took a small bite of my half of the apple, and it was sweet. It reminded me of how hungry I was, and I ate the rest of it. And Hulda said, "Wasn't it good? We should get you home. You live at Master Phillips's home, don't you, at his farm?" "Yes, ma'am." She took my hand and we began walking. I was pretty sure that it wasn't the way we came because we were going uphill. But soon we came to a high point and we could see all of Sleepy Hollow below. "Do you see that church that Master Phillips built?" "No, ma'am." "That steeple right there," she pointed. I said, "Yes, I see it, but Master Phillips didn't build that church. My granddaddy Cuffy did." "Ha ha. Yes, child, you're right. Anyway, you follow that steeple and you will find your way home." And she let go of my hand. "You're not coming with me?" I asked. "No, child. This is far as I go. But you can come and visit me." And then she added, "But don't tell anyone that you saw me." And then she disappeared back into the woods. Well, all right.
That was lovely. That was really
that
great
was lovely.
job.
That was, that clip was what we did when we were first workshopping, when we were first putting that story together, and that's when we started to feel like, oh, there's something there.
Yeah, we put it together to show the church that this is what we're thinking, and that was really when we were first like this. There could be something here.
There could be something, but that was that first meeting of Abby and Hulda and how it all began, in those early days,
right? And
to be able to tell the story was just so very meaningful to me, and of all the different stories that we have created together. It's definitely, well, I don't want to say they're all my favorites in one way or another, but this one was just different. And also, it's not just me telling the story.
Well, it's different in a way because this was really one of the first stories we put together that didn't exist somewhere else.
Yes.
That we were really putting together a story about someone that has not had a lot of stories about them.
Yeah, absolutely. On all different levels. And again, and it's not just me telling the story, it's also you performing. Although it's like a one-person storytelling, Jim, you are also playing, guitar, accompanying me,
right?
And it gives it like this other vibe.
There is a give and take.
There's definitely a give and take between what the story that I'm telling and the music that you're playing. And this story, because of the ending and all the things that we go through, it's kind of emotional. That we're not going to go into.
You'll see that on your own.
That's right. But it can be emotional.
Sure. I get choked up, and I wrote the thing, most of it. Yeah. I know what's coming, and I still get worked up, and I'm on stage, so I'm facing the other way while I'm playing.
And, last year was our first, let's see, we're in 22 now?
We're in 22 now.
Yeah, so 2021 was our first year of performing Hulda, the other legend of Sleepy Hollow. And so a lot of people hadn't really heard of it. And, thanks to Historic Hudson Valley, who put the word out in there, because usually they would have, Historic Hudson Valley would usually be sponsoring the Legend of Sleepy Hollow
in the Old Dutch Church.
Exactly. But because of COVID, they moved everything to Sunnyside.
That's where they have the show outside. Sunnyside is Washington Irving's home.
Yes.
The author of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow.
exactly. See, everyone is all in cahoots.
Everybody's in cahoots.
Yes. But we're really grateful to Historic Hudson Valley for supporting our, the show of Hulda in their marketing materials and ticketing. So people got to hear about the story. But at the very beginning, a lot, people were just like, I think honestly, I don't mind it. It is what it is. But I think at the beginning, people couldn't see Blaze, or a lot of other things might have been sold out.
There's a number of events in Sleepy Hollow area.
Sleepy Hollow is Halloween town.
Yeah. So they have the great Jack-o'-lantern Blaze, which is thousands of pumpkins carved into, large-scale installations with music and light, and it's very, very popular. Yeah. And of course, there's the Legend of Sleepy Hollow, and there are many, many other events that take place in Sleepy Hollow, and people just want to be there. It's probably, if not as popular, second in popularity to Salem.
Oh, absolutely.
Salem, Massachusetts.
Absolutely. So people are going there, and so there's a part of me that, like last year, I thought, well, people might have signed up for it or bought the ticket for Hulda because other things were sold out. Because things sell out really quickly. So, by the way, if you are listening to this in October...
It's too late.
Yeah, it might be too late. Make sure to get your tickets via Historic Hudson Valley or...
So it's hudsonvalley.org.
Yeah, hudsonvalley.org. Make sure to get your tickets for any of your desired Halloween shows.
Yeah, right.
But
tickets go on sale back in August.
Yes,
so
yes.
The likelihood in October is might be a little slim. You might be able to see Hulda.
Well, that's true. That's true. Well, we want to be a little optimistic.
Okay.
But hopefully, if you're listening to this, you would be interested in seeing Hulda. So, but I felt that people, they might not have they didn't know what Hulda was, but they're like, well, I can't get into Blaze. Okay, well, we'll get this. So the first couple of weekends were very
sparse,
because it was the first time no one had heard the story. And as far as, because there's also Hulda's Night that they do with the Rockefeller and it's a totally different kind of show. It's a totally kind of scary,
that
spooky.
We don't know a lot about.
No, we don't know a lot about it, but it's something else.
We're too busy doing our own show.
Exactly. We don't really know what anyone else is doing, but we know that it's something that happened. But what we're doing is we're telling the story of Hulda, and we are giving a full dramatic retelling of the story that we created. And those first couple of weekends, the attendance was kind of low, but there was this one of the first ones, there were two people in the audience, a woman and her husband.
It was a very intimate show.
Yes. But at the end, the woman was crying, she was bawling, and I was like, okay, she gets it. That's great. So it was really...
But even you got emotional towards the end of the run.
At the very end, there would be times when I would catch myself at the end, but I would be really good. But at the very last episode, when I was thanking everybody and thanking everyone for coming, I was, and I lost it. I'm an emotional person, so I can't help myself. But I was just so grateful to have had the opportunity to do this show, to tell this story. Right. And it's one of those stories that doesn't get told. So, you can see videos on YouTube, you can see these other things, but to have an actual, to have an origin story for Hulda, to kind of figure out her origin story and the research that we did to figure out where she might have come from, how she possibly could have learned how to communicate with Native Americans,
and her survival skills.
Yeah, sure. wow, what an amazing woman.
Absolutely.
So to be able to tell her story and to come up with something is just, it was definitely a highlight. So I'm excited that we get to do it again this year.
Yeah.
So we've been asked back at the Old Dutch Church. And speaking of the Old Dutch Church, we have that, there's that grave site there now, the gravestone for Hulda. And it refers to her as, Hulda of Bohemia, healer, herbalist, patriot, and for her service in the Revolutionary War. And it's
moving.
It is
and
quite moving.
People leave little gifts on it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I don't have any numbers on this, but my feeling is that her gravestone is probably the most visited regularly visited in the Old Dutch Church burial ground. Yeah, because not the large, not Sleepy Hollow. Yeah, exactly. Because whenever I go and visit now, I always, I like to go and say hello and pay my respects to Hulda. And while we're there, I always see like people are leaving coins or stones or other herbal packets, and that just touches my heart so much to hear that this legend is now really caught some momentum, and other people who have heard about her story are now leaving gifts at Hulda's gravestone at the Old Dutch Church at Sleepy Hollow. So it's just awesome. So another thing that I also wanted to mention, did I read about Deb McHugh, what she said about the nameless women?
I don't think so.
Yeah, so remember we mentioned that Westchester, which was all owned by Phillipsburg, it was known as no man's land. That's why was it that?
Well, because it was in between the British and American lines. So the British were in New York City, and the Americans were north of Westchester.
So that means Westchester was like besieged by both sides.
Exactly. Oh, right. So there would be foraging raids from either side, people stealing farmers' cattle and stores of grain and whatever wasn't nailed down.
They would burn things.
They would burn,
Yeah, they're like, well, if we will steal some stuff and then we'll burn the rest of it. But there were people that actually lived in Westchester. There were people who had families and farms, and there were tenant farms going on. So there were people there who were trying to live their lives.
Right.
And they were, and because there was no protection of either side, it was really a no man's land. Not to mention that the men, it was definitely a no man's land when you think about it, because the men, they were going off to war, or they were going off to be in the militia to protect Westchester, and as well as, the colonies.
Well, it's important to mention that there were probably an equal number of patriots and loyalists. So there was a lot of tension as well.
Yes.
It was a tough time.
Yes. But Deb McHugh, the head docent of the Old Dutch Church at Sleepy Hollow, she says that, and I have to read this quote because I think she said, some people will come looking for the witch, especially at this time of the year, and those of us who knew her history felt that it was important to give her proper recognition as a patriot. But she says, for me, honoring Hulda also honors the memory of the nameless women who contributed to the revolution as soldiers, spies, nurses, and cooks, as well as those who watched over their farms and families during those harsh and frightening times. So this is also about women, the women who were there, who had to step up. They had to step up to keep watch over their animals, who had to keep watch over their children. So all this is like, war is hell, and a lot of, it was a no man's land. There was no rules. You had to protect yourself and your people and your land, and there was no one there to do it for you. So the women had to step up. So it was a no man's land. It was a woman's land, But it kind of reminds me of Game of Thrones. If any of you watched it, they always had that that phrase "Valor Margulis," which means every man must die. But there was I don't know if it was it might have been Daenerys Targaryen, but she said, "We are not men." So it's like, not to say that women won't die, but just saying that's them. This is us. We have to do what we have to do. And I think that's also I'm a woman and I could speak for that. It's like, we have to do what we have to do. I am woman. Hear me roar. So, you know what? I have a fun fact.
Tell me.
I have a fun fact. So, well, so part of my storytelling in Hulda is that I get to use a German accent.
That's right.
And I took German. I actually took German in all through high school and my first year of college.
Ah.
Yeah, so it was fun to attempt, using a German accent to
tell the story.
And I think by the end of October, I was like speaking in a German accent.
It happens. If you're using an accent and you use it enough,
it just starts
to stop doing it.
You're answering questions that have nothing to do with it, and all of a sudden, Hulda pops out of my mouth. But another secondary fun fact is after we completed the run of Hulda, I got updated results from Ancestry.com for my DNA results. And so they update them from time to time as more information comes through. So after Hulda was done, Ancestry.com sent me these results saying, hey, we've updated your DNA results, and my German portion was 3% higher. And I was like, oh, see, I was thinking, because I was doing my accent. So so is that a coincidence? I think not.
So that's pretty much all about Hulda, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
All right, well, now that you know.
You know.